Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. So much, all of it fun. Jon Stinchcomb today. Dogs from the NCAA Tournament. We love that. Diamond Dogs took a series win from Kentucky. We'll talk briefly about that. Recruiting notes, got to get those. And spring practice ongoing as well. Kicking off with that, Kirby Smart talking about quarterbacks. Strong reaction. You would certainly imagine that it was the case. Plenty of people had plenty to say about what Kirby has recently said about his starting quarterback, we presume, Gunnar Stockton, the guy vying to compete for that job, Ryan Puglisi. Let's kick it off with that here today. Glad you are with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I am so thrilled that Georgia's in the NCAA Tournament. I just am proud to be back in this. Is the first time in the history of DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, that we've had an NCAA tournament game to speak about. Dogs' first time being in March Madness here in the DawgNation Daily era. So you better believe we're going to talk about that here coming up in just a few minutes. But prior to that, let's take care of some football business, and then we'll get to the big dance and Georgia's role on that. And, of course, it's Jon Stinchcomb coming up in just a few minutes as well. One of the biggest, and probably year to year, consistently the hottest topic is whatever might be going on with Georgia at the quarterback position. And Georgia fans in this situation are really no different than almost any other fans in sports. It's the biggest cliche in the world, but cliches typically become cliches for a reason. The obsession with the so-called backup quarterback and the belief that whoever's not playing is somehow probably better than the guy that is playing. And I'm not going to make fun about that or make a big thing about that, because I don't think the Georgia fans are unique in their kind of fascination with the quarterback that's standing on the sideline or holding the clipboard or waiting in the wings, that there's always going to be just a hunger for something new. And we say this all the time. You know, I've been a big sports fan my entire life. Sports fans always like rookies, freshmen, just sort of new energy, new blood, just something new to look at is just always really interesting. And that's perhaps especially true at the quarterback position. And at one point in time, Gunnar Stockton would have been there. Do you remember how, like, when Stockton came in at halftime of the SEC championship, oh my gosh, there was a lot of reaction of, finally, man, let's get this new blood in here. Let's get somebody that these players want to play for, and let's get, somebody that can kind of galvanize Georgia. There was a lot of that. And then you see Gunnar Stockton for a little bit, and all of a sudden now he's not new anymore. Something else is newer, and there's this fascination now with whatever might be newer than Gunnar Stockton. And for the moment, that's Ryan Puglisi. But over the course of years, a lot of quarterbacks have found themselves in the role that Puglisi's in right now. The slightly newer, the slightly less, exposed. I don't mean exposed in a bad way, but not getting a ton of exposure yet because we haven't seen him on the field. We haven't seen a lot of him. He's this sort of mysterious, candidate kind of hiding behind a curtain here perhaps. And a lot of Georgia fans are really interested in Puglisi, especially because we get these like little short videos. And I'm not in any way making fun here because I think he looks the part too. But in these little short videos, Puglisi standing tall, looking good in his, uniform, slinging it, running around. I've said a million times that if you were making a movie about a, football and you need to cast someone in the role of a quarterback, certainly in a situation like that, Puglisi absolutely looks the part. And so because of the way that he looks, a lot of Georgia fans are both either anticipating or just hopeful that he could also kind of spice up a quarterback competition here too. Not because I think the Georgia fans don't like Gunnar Stockton. I think by and large his favorable rating is probably pretty high. Maybe a little bit of an unknown commodity for a full season, but more favorable than not, I'm guessing, on the part of fans. But fans also always, as I said before, just kind of want the newer thing to be a part of this too. And that Puglisi, because of what we kind of view as his talent, might have a chance to sort of spice up this quarterback competition and make a run to perhaps be a starting quarterback, and making a push for that during the spring practice that's ongoing for UGA right now. So with that as the backdrop, something that Kirby Smart said last week has gotten a lot of attention. Smart goes on the Atlanta radio station, 92.9 The Game, and in speaking about a number of topics was asked directly about Ryan Puglisi in light of the fact that people expect Gunnar Stock to be the starting quarterback. But how about this guy, Ryan Puglisi? What are you seeing from him? Smart was complimentary, but a couple of the things that Smart said in the midst of this discussion also stood out to some Georgia fans. Let's listen in, and then let's react to what others themselves have reacted to. Kirby Smart from the Atlanta radio station, 92.9 The Game.
Well, he's a competitor. He never flinched during the recruiting process. As you know, it's well documented. You know, we had another commitment at times. I forget the timeline. You know, it was off and on. But he never wavered. And those have been, you know, some of the best kids we've recruited that really, they're like, I don't really care who else is coming. I don't care who's there. I see the growth and development you've had at the quarterback position. He had a passion and energy about Georgia. He's a really good baseball player. He's got arm talent. He's got size. He had great, his high school tape. He played in a really good league up there, and just a competitor. So he's come in, and he was one of those guys that really flashed when he was on the scout team, and that's traditionally what happens when you have a card, you don't have a read, and you just fire away. And he's made some really good throws on the run. He's got a strong arm, but he does have a long way to go in terms of learning exactly what we're asking him to do, the command of the offense, the volume of the offense. He's getting better at all those things.
So let's listen to a couple of things here from Kirby Smart, or let's reflect back on a couple of things from Kirby Smart. I think if you're a Georgia fan and you're hopeful about Ryan Puglisi, you love the fact that Smart says, hey, during the recruiting process, he never flinched, never wavered. This was a tough-minded young man who was certainly, steadfast in his belief in himself. Smart describing what other Georgia fans believe they've seen here. A lot of arm talent, good-looking size, just sort of looking the part. And that's kind of what Georgia fans would say, yeah, we've seen that from Ryan Puglisi too. But the stuff that Kirby gets to see that the rest of us don't get to see, this is where the stir gets created, where there's a lot of, I don't want to say controversy, but certainly a very strong reaction from Smart when Kirby says, in light of all of that, in light of his competitive nature, in light of his physical gifts, in light of everything else, Ryan Puglisi as a quarterback still has a long way to go. And that statement for some Georgia fans, not quite controversial, that's taking it too far, but it is certainly the kind of thing that would perhaps leave some to sort of scratch their head of, really? Going into year two still has a long way to go? And I do get why Georgia fans feel that way because, you'd like to believe that moving into a second year, someone could be more ready to play. But I guess my word of caution on that would be this. Let's look around college football here for a moment. If you want to go back a decade or so ago, think about a guy that joins our show each and every week, Jake Fromm. Jake Fromm played at Georgia as a true freshman, stepping in for a quarterback, Jacob Eason, after an injury. Eason himself had played at Georgia as a true freshman. And that was a time in the sport where a lot of very young quarterbacks were playing right away and playing, well. But ask yourself this question. What has the sport looked like as of late? As of late, we're not quite, and I don't necessarily have the full explanation as to why this is. I won't pretend to necessarily diagnose why. I'm just simply describing what is. That in recent years, we have seen a lot fewer very young quarterbacks playing right away. Now, you do see like a Dylan Raiola, like you saw a year ago. He was the starting quarterback at Nebraska, but Nebraska was also not a team of consequence in the 2024 season. That for the teams that matter, it's been the veteran presence at quarterback that has paid big dividends. Obviously at Georgia, that was Stetson Bennett, who was much older than anybody else he was competing with, using that age and experience to his advantage. That's a little bit like what Carson Beck's going to try to do at Miami this year. This is a guy that was part of the class of 2020. We're moving into the 2025 season. Beck now very, very experienced, much older than almost anybody else. That's becoming a little bit of a norm. But even whether it be Will Howard from Ohio State a year ago or, other quarterbacks you want to point at, that the teams that are having success with quarterbacks that are experienced. And the day and age of the sort of super talented, very young quarterback just sort of stepping in and leaning on, talent and moxie alone, this sport in mass has kind of moved away from that, and it's moved to an older, more experienced quarterback that's either been a part of a program or been on the field or just been around the block a couple of times. That is what the sport's becoming more about. And that is the advantage that Gunnar Stockton has over Ryan Puglisi. Stockton played 6 quarters of high-level competition, a second half of an SEC championship against a Texas team that was at least good enough to win the national championship, and a college football playoff game, first start for him in the Superdome against a Notre Dame team in the college football playoff with the eyes of the world on him. That is just a level of experience, and we have not wavered in our statement about this. The experience that Stockton has over Puglisi gives him a huge advantage in this quarterback competition, at least for now. And the sense that we also get is, in the midst of all of this, Stockton not only has that experience, but he's also kind of leveraging that experience. He's leaning on it to make him even better moving into this spring, which is a precursor to this fall. And if you want to go back to last week when Kirby Smart spoke to the media to kind of kick off Georgia's spring practice, he talked about that, both the experience that Stockton gained and how he's grown from that experience since then. This is what Smart said going back to just last week.
Yeah, he's a tremendous leader, but that's nothing I didn't already know. I mean, I would be remiss if I said, well, all that he's done this or that. He's done everything right since he's been here. That's really kind of what he embodies. He's a tough kid that loves football, that loves his teammates. You're not going to get a lot of rah-rah out of Gunnar. He doesn't feel like that's his role. He earns people's respect by how he works and how he carries himself. He's got a tremendous amount of confidence in his ability. He's got a lot of knowledge of our system, and I think that kind of resonates with the other players. They rally around Gunnar because they have a lot of respect for him.
I mean, I just think that's a very clearly stated assessment of Gunnar Stockton. And it's very, very similar to what Smart would have said leading into the Sugar Bowl, in a game which I thought Stockton played well enough to win. Unfortunately, Georgia had some issues that day, but I don't think that Stockton was one of the things that inhibited Georgia's chances of winning in that particular spot. Kirby very clear about what he thinks he likes about Stockton and what Stockton's teammates seem to like about him as well. Now, the unspoken part of all this is if you show the same short video clips of Gunnar compared to the same short video clips of Puglisi, when it comes to sort of throwing the ball and just sort of looking the part, maybe for some people, Ryan looks a little bit more like that than Gunnar does. Maybe that's the case. But there's also an invisible part of playing quarterback, and according to Kirby Smart, the part that's invisible to those of us on the outside of the program, those are the things that Gunnar seems to be excelling at. It's not just the coach saying that in some sort of coach-speaky way. It's the teammates saying that over and over again themselves. The people that are closest to the situation, the players inside the program, they just know, and they just have a level of insight into this that those of us on the outside, even those that try to be a little closer but still not in the building, there's just a level of knowledge that the players themselves are going to have, and the level of trust they have in Gunnar Stockton means a lot to me. That does not mean that that Ryan Puglisi could not have a tremendous future here at Georgia, and that one day he achieves a level even higher than what Gunnar Stockton might achieve for Georgia here this year. All of that is very much possible for Puglisi, but I do think that Georgia fans should take it seriously right now. When Kirby Smart says that Stockton is ahead of Puglisi and sort of in so many words describing the reasons why, I do think that's the kind of thing that Georgia fans ought to take seriously. Now, let me shift gears to something else here just briefly. A lot going on with UGA recruiting over the course of the last couple of days. And speaking of the quarterback position, let's deal with that here right now. Jared Curtis, the 5-star from the class of 2026, has taken his Georgia visit, an unofficial multi-day, just after taking kind of the same type of visit to Oregon. Obviously, Oregon and Georgia are the two finalists here. Jeff Sentell had an interesting story about this at DawgNation.com. And one of the things that Jeff dropped into that story was an image from Curtis's Instagram story to kind of give you a little bit of a flavor of, even in the, NIL age we live in now, still some of the old school recruiting tactics still going on. If you're watching on a video here, you see the video image of the path to the pros with Curtis holding up the uniform. I'm colorblind, so I can't tell what uniform that's necessarily supposed to be. But holding up the uniform, Roger Goodell standing next to him, and the caption saying, "Our path to the pros." So clearly this is how Georgia's selling Curtis of, we can get you the NFL draft because that's what we've done for so many prospects. You could be the next one on that. And as Jeff has reported at DawgNation.com, it sounds like the visit obviously went very well. Now, the issue here is this is different than it was years ago when it's all about, hey, does it feel like home? Does it feel like family? Do you like where you're going to be living? Do you like your coaches? Do you like your teammates? This is obviously now a much more kind of down to business type negotiation with the NIL money being a heavy part of this. And while Georgia has achieved much more as a program than Oregon has, there is this thought that if Oregon is involved, that Georgia becomes a point spread underdog because of the Phil Knight Nike money. Is that the case here? Jeff reporting at DawgNation.com that Georgia doesn't necessarily have to have the highest bid to be the winner when it comes to Curtis, but we would presume it probably does need to be competitive with that. And when you look at what we said before, a Will Howard wins a quarterback national championship for Ohio State, Georgia using Stetson Bennett in 2021 and 2022. Do you need what we would guess is the sort of as a five-star quarterback, the sort of multi-million-dollar quarterback to come out and win here right now? Do you need to spend that big on a quarterback of this magnitude to be the best possible team that you can be? And a little bit like what we might find out with, like, say, the Cincinnati Bengals, who just, re-signed, their two receivers to big money to go along with Joe Burrow. If you spend big on this, do you have the money you need to go out and spend on other players at other positions? It's all really fascinating here right now. Sounds like Georgia is deeply involved in this, and it sounds like the ultimate answer on Curtis may come sooner rather than later. But all indications are Georgia had a very, very effective pitch to Jarrett here this week. Also, one more note, Georgia does get a commitment for its class of 2026. Brady Marchese, a wide receiver from Cartersville, announcing his pledge to Georgia. A three-star prospect. And this is, I'll give you a couple thoughts on this. Thought number one is, obviously we have no idea how Marchese will perform at the college level, but when it comes to scouting receivers, finding diamonds in the rough sometimes, this is what Georgia does well. Georgia has identified talent at the receiver position probably as well as anybody else. People think of Georgia not always winning with the biggest and best receivers, although the class of 2025 is a little different than that. But when it comes to identifying talent others missed out on, I would say that Georgia has done as well with that as anybody. Now, does Marchese become the next one of those? Who knows? But this is in keeping with what Georgia's sort of done successfully in the past. I'll also say that, if I'm kind of saying who do I want to sort of place a bet on or not, Cartersville is a program that produces a lot of major college talent year after year, multiple years now for that program. High level of competition at practice every day, deep region, pretty good level of competition on Friday night. So a Cartersville player coming to Georgia at a position that Georgia's typically scouted well, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a shot on this and seeing how it works out. I think that Marchese is a welcome addition to the class of 2026 for UGA, and certainly fun to have some good recruiting news to return back to work with here on a Monday morning. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We're glad you're with us today, whether it's video 10 a.m. live or after that on demand anytime. Podcast wherever you find them. Boy, how smooth has the podcast been as of late. You love all of that. Radio, Athens Sports Radio 96 The Ref. Just really, really happy to have you as a part of our show, and so thankful to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia who make it possible here today. I had a great experience a couple of weeks ago. Got a chance to be out kind of in the community, hanging out with our friends from Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Seeing them in action was just a really fun thing. Learning more about the Pella product and what makes it such a just a great choice for you when it's time to upgrade your windows, your doors. Pella being an awesome option on that. By the way, nice continuity here. The same clothes that I'm wearing there, I'm also wearing here today. So that works out pretty well. And if you want your chance to meet the folks from Pella, to hang out, to have a good time, you've got a couple of chances to do that here very soon here too, including on March 22nd and 23rd at the Conyers Cherry Blossom Festival. That's a great chance to be out there if you're over in that part of town. or coming up on the 29th and the 30th of this month at the Brookhaven Cherry Blossom Festival. We kind of reach that sort of festival time of year, a lot of fun, outdoor activities. We kind of move towards the spring. And our friends from Pella out there and a part of so many of these. So if you want to experience for yourself I really think unique technology around these windows, the kind of the built-in screens, the built-in blinds, or all the ways in which, Pella is helping you save money on your energy bills, making sure your home looks good on the outside as well, which can improve your resale value, certainly benefit your curb appeal. Our friends from Pella got you on all of that. So stop by and see them, whether it's in their experience center in Duluth or over here in Dunwoody near where our studio is for now, or at one of these Cherry Blossom Festivals. In Conyers on March 22nd, 23rd, Brookhaven March 29th and 30th. Just a great way to experience everything that Pella Window and Door of Georgia's got going on. And right now, great savings. How about $750 off your project and 0% APR for 36 months? So find out more online. It's PellaGA.com/DawgNation. That's PellaGA.com/DawgNation. You can also give them a call. 678-638-1429. One more time on that, 678-638-1429. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is going beyond. All right, we're going to get Jon Stinchcomb here in a moment. A lot to talk to Jon about, including some football stuff from spring practice. All of that coming up. But prior to that, let's go around the DawgHouse here today, poured by our friends at Dr. Pepper. And let's talk about the Georgia basketball team in the NCAA tournament, making it as a 9 seed. And let's just be very clear here for a moment. Tough road for Georgia. Round 1 matchup against Gonzaga. This is sort of a perennial, like Sweet 16 level team at least. They've been to the Final Four a couple of times. And the interesting thing from the Gonzaga side here is that there had been some chatter about the Zags even coming into the tournament, because this is a Gonzaga team from a profile standpoint that's very similar to a lot of the previous Gonzaga teams. They're almost always a darling of like the analytics, advanced stats world. They've been like a top 5 offensive efficiency team for like the last 5 years. They are very frequently up near the very top of, like, if you care about like say Ken Pomeroy rankings, things like that. They're up near the very top a lot. But this is also a team that hasn't always achieved in the NCAA tournament to match what their, analytics rankings are. They come from, historically they've been the West Coast Conference, which is not the same level of competition. So you got a situation this year where, much like a lot of previous Gonzaga teams, they're incredible from the analytics standpoint. They're top 20 in the net, but they've only got 5 quad 1 wins. That's the fewest quad 1 wins of any of the teams in the top 20. So team with a very good analytics profile, but not a lot of high-quality wins. And so there had been some debate about Gonzaga coming into this weekend of they could be as high as a 6 seed. They could be, as low as they were. Obviously, ultimately, they kind of dropped down a couple of seed lines below what they expected to be. They are, about 6-7 point favorite here over Georgia in this particular spot. And to be completely frank, I don't think this is a great matchup for Georgia. I do believe that the tournament is one of those things in which we just see experienced coaches matter a lot in this tournament. And I think that there have been years in which Mark Few for Gonzaga has probably underperformed expectations, but there are lots of trips to the Sweet 16. When you think about Georgia, who sort of has that Achilles heel of, kind of being sort of shut down offensively in the second half sometimes, a coach like Few would have a chance to do that. I don't think this is a great matchup, and I think that Houston, who you would face in round 2, is one of the 3 best teams in the entire tournament, so that's a tough deal here as well. However, to put the more positive spin on this for a moment, when you look at over the course of years, when Gonzaga, who Georgia will play, when they have had issues in the tournament, the sorts of teams they have those issues with are often teams that kind of look like Georgia, the big power conference teams with sort of the big, beef in the paint. I think Asa Newell, who had 17 rebounds, other day in the big win for the Dog. A guy like this, I think, plays a huge role for Georgia. The size that Georgia has in the front court, the ability to just sort of push Gonzaga around a little bit. Ultimately, that is probably where Georgia's chance at an upset probably lies here. And I do think that, once again, while on paper Gonzaga is a better team than Georgia is, I do think because Georgia's been a very rugged SEC, because Georgia does have some guys that can just go get it off the glass from a rebounding standpoint, that Georgia has, I think, the chance here to just sort of out-physical Gonzaga and show a level of athlete, a level of size that Gonzaga just simply does not see in the West Coast Conference. Either way, though, whether Georgia wins on Thursday afternoon against the Zags or not, this has been a successful season for Georgia, and it is a thrill to be able to talk about the Dogs in the NCAA tournament. And there was one thing that Silas Demery yesterday when a couple of the Georgia players and Coach Mike White, when they met with the media, Demery said something about his own personal ambition for being the tournament that I just tell you, it spoke to me in so many ways. I want to play this clip from Silas Demery, one of the terrific Georgia players, probably the most important Georgia player down the stretch the last few weeks, talking about just how much being in the NCAA tournament meant and means to him. Here is Silas on that topic.
I would probably kind of say I was just blessed to be able to be in this situation. I think just to think back as like a little kid, just always watching those games, especially during high school, like teachers turning on during the times in class, but just to be able to finally be a part of this moment, and especially, being able to come back and do it in year 2, I'm just grateful and happy to be a part of it.
Funny thing is, I'm way older than Silas Demery is, obviously. But that's my story too, man. Like the NCAA tournament when I was about in high school, it was the biggest thing in the world. And so many of you could tell the same story of you're trying to get that hall pass, you're trying to get into the library to sort of watch the tournament games, or they roll the TV cart into your room. By the time I was, I guess by the time I was in high school, they also had the TVs, like, the old Zell Miller money kicked in. They had the TVs up there on the wall too. Maybe your teacher would kind of flip it over there, let you watch it. But like watching tournament games in high school is just the best stuff ever. And filling out those brackets and doing that, my memory is back in that age, college basketball, because of all the recognizable stars, was as big to me as college football was. It was only years later that college football greatly distanced itself over college basketball. As a kind of kid growing up, the tournament, man, was like the biggest thing in the world. And like those formative years in high school that Silas is describing, that's when it was for me. And it's weird that he would say that because we're obviously from two completely different generations. But, man, that's my same story too. So there's a lot of nostalgia for me because I just grew up talking tournament and talking seeds and who's doing what and who's in the bubble. And to be able to do that again with Georgia here right now, I just think is a great thing. So I love that particular clip from Silas Demery. Let me also mention this just very, very briefly about another Georgia sport. Then we're going to bring on Jon Stinchcomb. I was lucky enough to be able to take my son to the Georgia baseball game on Friday. Dan Jackson at the first pitch, and then Dan came and sat a couple of rows in front of us. That was a big thrill for my son. He enjoyed getting to sit so close to Dan Jackson, obviously the not the baseball player, but the former Georgia football player. Georgia obviously goes on to win the series against Kentucky this weekend. Having some issues on the mound, but slugging it as well as anybody in America right now. But my point is, having been there on Friday, y'all, the atmosphere for this game was terrific. Like, college baseball is so red hot right now in the SEC, and Georgia's such a big part of that. These games are so much fun. This is not a commercial because I'm not getting a dime from them from saying this. I'm just giving you my own personal experience. If you get a chance to get to Foley Field for one of these SEC games, weather's great, the vibe in the stadium's great, the renovations look cool. What they've done with the kind of the old sort of like, going out towards right field, the Kudzu Hill area, the improvements there around that's really fun. This is a great way to spend a weekend. Now, the game was 17 hours long, but that's nobody's fault. That's just the way it worked out. But the vibe was terrific, and Georgia got itself a big SEC series win, which is obviously the name of the game. You got to get as many of those as you can. None of them are going to be easy. Really, really fun with the Diamond Dogs this weekend. Cannot recommend that enough if you have a chance to do that. This is just good, old-fashioned fun at the ballpark. I loved every minute of it. My son did too. Really, really great experience, and great to see Georgia get a couple of really valuable SEC wins this weekend too. That is around the DawgHouse. It's poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. And if I'm watching basketball, baseball, football, whatever I'm watching, I am watching it with the delicious one-of-a-kind flavor of Dr. Pepper. It's a pepper thing. It always is for me. I look forward to it as a treat after every show. I enjoy it no matter what I'm doing. And as you're out there shopping at your local Kroger, wherever you're picking up your groceries, I would encourage you to pick up some Dr. Pepper too, including the brand new Dr. Pepper Blackberry and Dr. Pepper Blackberry Zero Sugar. Dr. Pepper always kind of coming up with creative new flavor options just to have some fun and give people a chance to experience something they've never experienced before. The latest example of that is Dr. Pepper Blackberry and Dr. Pepper Blackberry Zero Sugar. We've had folks at our DawgNation Invasions get a chance to try it. They loved it. We believe you'll love it too. And we're glad to have Dr. Pepper as a part of Around the DawgHouse here today. I got some more tournament thoughts a little bit later on. We'll do some of that. Also, interesting news involving College GameDay. We may touch on that a little bit too. But for now, on everything else around Georgia, let's talk to our guy, the former Georgia All-American here, Jon Stinchcomb, today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So John's a little closer to my age than Silas Demery is. I'm curious, John, when I think about the NCAA tournament, I think about high school. Because like back then, early high school would have been like Fab Five, Pitino at Kentucky. But even like sort of later high school, kind of into college, it's like Jerry Stackhouse, Rasheed Wallace at UNC. And like these teams all had very recognizable stars, oftentimes for more than 1 year. College basketball, and I'm not trying to, turn this into remember when, but like college basketball in my formative years as a sports fan was a very big deal. So when I hear Silas say, oh, man, I remember being in high school trying to sneak off and go watch these tournament games. Now I get a chance to play in it. Like, it's so cool to hear someone so much younger than me say that, because I'm telling you right now, those are some of my best memories, bar none, of just trying to find some way to get in front of a TV at noon on a Thursday and Friday and watch whatever game might be taking place. I love the fact that, generations later, kids are still trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, it's fun. And those are some fond memories, especially as it got near spring break in high school and you spend a little time at the beach and then come back in and watch some games. It should be exciting. And to hear that next generation find that joy that we got to find coming up, it puts a smile on your face, because it was, back in the day, it was watching the blue bloods, if you will, and then getting ready for some of the upsets, knowing that, it's never the 1, 2, 3, 4 that fills out that, 16 for the following weekend. So that's what makes this exciting. And I think now more than ever, there's such parity, and to see the flipping of the NCAA tournament from used to be ACC dominated for a while, and then kind of floated around, and now to see the SEC dominance of the brackets. It's fun to see the cycle of sports at the collegiate level, and the representation that the Southeastern Conference has across all sports, but especially now you look at it and you say, there's well represented in football, but also, basketball, it's become the go-to conference.
So listen, no matter what, I'm just happy to have the Dogs in the tournament, thrilled about it. Anything after this is gravy to me. I think they can already hang the mission accomplished banner. However, we're going to be, honest, and I think you and I both aspire to be. It's a tough road. It is a really tough road. Gonzaga is a team that's probably seated a little lower than their analytics profile suggests they should be. Houston, which would await you in round 2, is one of the 3 teams I think that can win the national championship. This is not a very easy draw for UGA. I think experienced coaches matter. Of course, Mike White's won tournament games, but few's been around now forever. So I do think that Georgia has a really tough stretch if it were to try to advance. Obviously, the point spread suggests that too. Gonzaga, pretty sizable favorite here as far as an 8-9 game kind of goes. But still kind of fun to see Georgia playing against a recognizable basketball brand like Gonzaga. But honesty compels me to admit a pretty difficult game for Georgia overall.
Yeah, this was certainly one of the benchmarks when you bring in Coach White. It's like, all right, we need to get back into tournament play. And that is a box that gets checked this year, and that's a good thing. Now, the bar continues to rise, and, it's not just make the tournament. We'd like to make some runs into it. This year, like you say, it's not very favorable. I don't know a lot about Gonzaga. I just learned more listening to that 3 or 4 minutes that you talked about them before I got on air than I had beforehand. So it'll be interesting to see. I know there's opportunities for upset. I know this: if Georgia can beat Florida and one of the better teams in this tournament, that they've shown capability and grit and had to fight in some games, and they know what it what it's taken in those big time moments, and they've fallen short a couple times. So I think you learn from those as well. Playing in the SEC is not easy, but it should prepare you for difficult contests. And Gonzaga is not an easy round one game, nor will Houston be most likely in that second round if Georgia gets there. But playing in the SEC is not easy either.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gonzaga is obviously going to, fill it up if they have a chance to. But Georgia can, if you're looking for the chance at an upset, Georgia can push them around. And these sort of big power conference teams have pushed Gonzaga around before previous iterations. So if you're looking for the upset, that's where it comes from. I think that Georgia's front court's actually at times played pretty well this year. I think those guys can, kind of shove them around a little bit, just be the physically tougher team because of the SEC grind. Perhaps that's the recipe for an upset victory. Let me shift gears to football, if you don't mind. We also talked a moment ago about the five-star quarterback, Jared Curtis. Now, we're in a different age now where college ball is a little bit more like professional sports where, obviously you like the player, but at what price? And in the NFL with free agency, you do this all the time. When you hear about the list of free agents that are available, well, of course, I like this guy, I like that guy. You'd love to have him on your team. But it's never just that. It's at what price? I mentioned the Cincinnati Bengals a moment ago that just kind of re-upped, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. That's what Joe Burrow wanted. But now you got $8 gazillion with a quarterback and 2 wide receivers. That part of your roster is going to look outstanding. But who's blocking for you? What does that do to the rest of your 53-man roster? These are tough decisions that every team has to deal with. So I'm going to ask you, and it's almost like you take the name out of it because, Jared Curtis' particular name here is probably less important than the actual crux of the matter is when you see what Georgia has won with and what maybe at times Georgia's kind of fallen short with. When you see the rest of college football, how much do you think that Georgia needs the five-star quarterback that's perhaps very expensive? Is that an important recipe for winning in your mind?
I know this. I'm going to speak bigger picture first before we get back to five-star quarterback specifically. In the NFL, they have a price range for position groups and what you can expect to pay, what you should pay, and what you're willing to pay for a difference maker at that position. And I feel certain that college is doing the same thing now, where even as they talk about the rev share and how that gets dispersed, even in recruiting currently, there are price ranges for position groups. And, for a uniquely talented player in that position, maybe you can fudge that number up a little bit and make space, but it comes at a cost. It means you're cutting in other positions. And obviously in today's game, there is not a more important position than that of quarterback. And no matter what system, hardly matters what system. 99% of the systems out there, from the collegiate level to the professional ranks, if you don't have a good signal caller, a good decision maker, someone who can either bring an X factor to the run game or make good decisions and get the ball to where it needs to be as a passer, then you're going to be behind the 8 ball. And teams can do it. It comes with great defenses, great support cast. Maybe you have a great offensive line, a run game. But at the end of the day, having a difference maker at quarterback, you look at the teams that have been successful. I think you look at the past national championships, and almost all of them, as a matter of fact, I can't think of very many that don't have that X factor, that difference maker at that position. So, I think it raises all ships when you've got a great quarterback that can make the team better and keep defenses honest. So there is a price for every player. It certainly is higher at that position than others.
At the risk of getting too deep in the weeds here, you mentioned in the NFL, the sort of expected positional value in relation to the salary cap, and we are moving into kind of a revenue sharing world where we're led to believe that Georgia's revenue number for football from the revenue sharing is going to be in between $13 and $14 million. However, collective still exists, NIL still exists. It's supposed to be, true NIL, which is, fair market value for endorsements, things like that. But there is still, my point is, a huge unknown variable to all of this, which is on top of the revenue sharing, how much additional money can you expect to have? We would say that Georgia's competitor for Curtis, Oregon, they're going to have a ton of additional money, or at least a sizable figure on top of whatever their Big Ten revenue sharing number is. Their state legislature is pushing to kind of keep those deals confidential so that they don't have to be, scrutinized by like Deloitte and the clearinghouse type stuff. So clearly they still want to be aggressive with NIL in a revenue sharing world. We presume that Georgia's going to do whatever it can do to be competitive too. And yet ultimately, the oncoming era of revenue sharing is not going to increase the clarity we have about what these deals actually are. It sounds like the water is going to remain as murky as it has been, right?
Yeah, in just different ways. Because I think Deloitte, you mentioned them, they're going to have to clear some of these deals as to being fair market value deals. What is that? And you submit a deal, and if it gets kicked back, are you just adjusting numbers until they approve it? And how far in advance can you negotiate those type contracts? And it's just so nebulous now. I think you've got some clarity just because there is rev share. There is opportunity there, and it comes with some agreements that could be negotiated. But the role of the third party, whether it's a collective or individual NIL licensing contracts between an individual player and that third party company, it's still yet to be determined how impactful, and I'm sure it will be, that can be in recruiting players to come to your program and also sustaining and retaining players as a part of it. So in addition to that, there's going to be lawsuits. There's going to be some upset individuals and teams at these universities that are saying, hey, we didn't get our fair share of the revenue. And whether you can justify it or not, I think everyone's trying to pass the buck a little bit. The NCAA, the conference level, and certainly the schools. Nobody wants to get sued over this, but yet there's not enough framework in place to offer protections as to what's allowed and what's not. And at some point there's going to be some congressional involvement, and it just gets nasty. And I think that's where we've been in such a turbulent world since they opened up the opportunity for NILs, and it certainly manifested itself differently than what they anticipated with collectives and the impact it's had on recruiting. And it's a far cry from Johnny Manziel not wanting or not being able to tap in on the jersey sales with his name on the back. So it's a weird, wild world, and there's still a lot to be determined as you move forward.
The time we have left, I want to talk a little about the Georgia spring practice storylines. We just heard from Kirby Smart talking about Ryan Puglisi, a little bit of an honest assessment of, hey, everything looks the way it's supposed to look for a quarterback, but still a ways to go in terms of processing what needs to be known to go out there and succeed. We're led to believe, in contrast, Gunnar Stockton, because he has played, is a good bit of ahead of Puglisi for those reasons. What do you make of it, the fact that, right now there seems to be a very familiar conversation going on, not just for Georgia fans, but for sports fans in general? What looks to be a really intense fascination among many with the presumed backup quarterback, kind of at the expense of the starting quarterback. What do you make about the fact that right now there's a lot of energy from some fans around Puglisi, even though that it seems like Gunnar Stockton is the guy most set up to start and would be Georgia's best chance of winning right now?
Hadn't that been the discussion for years now,
Yeah.
BA? I mean, we've talked about whether it was Stetson or Carson. It doesn't matter. I mean, fans are always looking for the next shiny toy, and there's a reason why hot takes are fun. It's because you get to go out there and you speculate on what could be. Now, Puglisi gets out there and has a bad couple plays, and those guys get to that had those hot takes get to creep back into the crevices from which they come. But if he does hit it, you're like, I've been telling you forever. So it's fun to speculate. I think it's good in March to have those kind of competitions and those motivations, whether it comes through a media outlet or the chatter from the outside. You want it to be competitive. You want it to mean something for the guys during practice. And for Georgia, there is so much opportunity. There are so many spaces where there's competition, whether it's the quarterback position, obviously, the wide receiver room, the offensive line room. That's the entire offense. young guys looking to. There's a couple really talented tight ends that are trying to figure out what they can contribute early. So that's every position group on the offense. The defense is no different. You look at the opportunities that exist on that side of the ball, and you're going, man, whether you're a cornerback or a safety, there's spaces in the linebacker room. There's spaces at D-line and edge rusher. So this is a meaningful spring practice for this Georgia team. And whether you're a young guy or a veteran that's trying to hold on to your spot or carve out more time, that's a good thing. You want that competition. You want that chatter. You want this to be meaningful for the guys that are out there at practice. And for Georgia, these are needed reps that can really make a huge impact when we get to the season. Now, you get to late August, and I want there to be a clear front runner in every position room. Not that it means that the second string isn't good, but you want that first string to be the clear choice that we've got our guy and we're going to run with him.
I want to read one thing to you before I let you go here and get a reaction from you about this. So Connor Riley last week at DawgNation.com, having gotten a chance to see a couple of minutes of Georgia practice, writes that running back Bo Walker, well put together athlete. The freshman running back isn't the tallest player in the room. He's listed at 5'9", but he seems to have the type of body that can take and dole out punishment, going on to sort of describe some good things that he was doing. Connor not the only one to sort of share some insight into Walker here right now. There's always going to be these handful of players that just generate early buzz during spring practice. I love all this stuff. Cannot get enough of rumors. I enjoy them, whether they turn out to be true or not. Still like the rumors. They're just fun for me. But as a player yourself, how seriously do you take early buzz? I mean, they just put on the pads for the first time on Saturday. This is as early as the buzz gets. I mean, like, we have just barely started, and we've already got, breakout stars from spring practice, it would seem. How seriously do you take that, kind of knowing what actually happens on a practice field when somebody does earn some early chatter?
If it's one time, it's fun. If it's two or three times, then it's like, okay, it's piqued my interest. And the more consistent it is. Another name is Nate Frazier. We did the same thing in spring ball last year, and as training camp rolled around, continued to flash, and you're going, hey, there might be something to this. And I think that's what you're looking for, is the consistency. As they have more practices, there's going to be a young wide receiver that has a big splash play that you got to see at a scrimmage, and you're going, hey, that's exciting. And what you're looking for is consistency. George Pickens was a guy back in the day where you started to hear his name making plays in practice. Puglisi is another guy where he comes in and you're going, man, he's made some nice throws. And more than anything, it's good to have that, but you're looking for consistency in their playmaking ability. And for a guy like Bo Walker, I think what's exciting for him is, when you don't fit a profile, right? So he's a little bit shorter than most. And there's other guys that may not fit that profile that you're looking for. When they flash, when they continue to get those opportunities because they're hard earned, Stetson Bennett is a guy like that, where, statistically you look at him on paper and you're like, I'm not impressed, but yet they're football players. Those get me really excited because, they have a hunger that usually comes along with that chip on your shoulder, that they have something to prove, and it makes for some really good football players. So whether it's Bo Walker or anyone else that may not fit that prototype of what this position looks like, those usually offer some pretty fun storylines because there's a chip on your shoulder and a hunger that's unmatched.
Jon, I think it's great analysis. I love it. I'm glad to talk to you each week. Hope you enjoy the upcoming NCAA tournament. Maybe we can actually talk about the Dogs advancing there. Wouldn't that be fun? Thanks for your time on our show today. Have a great week. We'll look forward to speaking to you soon here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
Always great to be a dog. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs indeed.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, I think that's really good analysis on how to make sense of the analysis when it comes to the so-called breakout stars. And I'm exaggerating when I say breakout star, but there are guys that are going to generate some buzz. And for someone like me who's sort of on the outside and you sort of know some people who know some people who know some people, they tell somebody and that person tells somebody and that eventually that person tells you, how do you interpret that? And I think that Jon gives us some good insight. I believe we may unpack that a little bit deeper at some point in time because obviously that's one of the names of the game in spring practice. I don't make any bones about this. I love all that stuff. Anybody who's willing to share a rumor, I am all ears to hear it. I'm just telling you. And we got to be careful about which rumors we do and don't sort of amplify here on the show. But I'm all for whatever rumors you might have about what might be happening at these practices. And that's one of the things that makes spring practice fun. Now, speaking of fun, let's get ready to have some of that when it comes to Royal Caribbean. Boy, my family, we've been talking a lot of chatter around the Adams household about could there be a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation in our future. We're certainly hopeful that might be the case. And to me, that's always the most fun part. That's just what you do, is you start talking about when you could go, what you might do, and then you kind of get into the whole, I want to do this, and I want to do that. And the great thing about so many of these Royal Caribbean cruise ships, for instance, Utopia of the Seas, that's the ship that we're going to be on for our DawgNation cruise coming up next month. You know, when it comes to a ship like that size, newest ship in the fleet for now for Royal Caribbean, there are so many options of things to do, really, and, something for the entire family, something that the kids like, the adults like, everything in between, we can do together. It's just a wonderful experience. So if you want the joy of these kinds of conversations with your family, you deserve a vacation. And frankly, it's the kind of thing that changes your entire year, is when you have this to look forward to. I think it inspires you. And then on the other side of that, I just think you come back refreshed. You're just a better version of yourself when you've had a wonderful vacation. And a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation is, I think, the best choice you can make. So Jessica Slater's a terrific travel agent. You call her. She'll be right there to help you. Really intent on making it a great experience for you. Her number, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. That is the email address to reach her. Royal Caribbean, so many great things, exciting things happening here in 2025. All right, let me talk about a football note here for a moment. I thought this was interesting. So Paul Feinbaum, who's been kind of out and about a lot lately, goes on, do y'all know Saturday Down South website? They have a podcast. He goes on the Saturday Down South podcast, and he's talking about Nick Saban, ESPN's College GameDay. His belief is that Saban may not stay on the show very long, that he may be looking to leave. And Feinbaum's reason for saying this was that, he says TV sort of grinds you down after a while. And listen, I won't pretend to know the innermost thoughts of Nick Saban or anything like that, but I would obviously stand in opposition to the idea that TV grinds you down. Y'all, look at who's on TV. And I hope to be the same way. What a gift from God it would be to be able to do this. But just look at the NFL alone. Al Michaels is still doing games on Amazon. He's 80, I believe. You just had, Jimmy Johnson retire from Fox. He was an advanced age on there. Terry Bradshaw, very advanced age there. Howie Long, one of the younger guys on that show, he's in his 60s, I believe, now. You just had, there are a lot of guys in a very advanced season of life still working on TV. I don't know that I would say that TV wears you down. In fact, think about not just sports television, but just sort of television in general. How many people have ever willingly walked away from a broadcast career? Like John Madden, I guess, did on his own terms. Johnny Carson, I guess, did. Maybe David Letterman, maybe that's an example of someone who did. Other than that, people just sort of do TV for as long as they can because it's a pretty good gig, not exactly, working in a coal mine necessarily, which as a West Virginia native, Nick Saban would know about. So I don't know that TV grinds you down. I'm not here to stir the pot and create rumors, things like that. But if Saban, who by all intents seems to be in very good health, if he were to walk away from College GameDay, you might kind of wonder, does he have something else in mind? And I don't know. Just put a pin in that. Let's come back to that if this really does happen, because most people, once they get into TV, never stop doing TV. And if Saban, who seems to be in very good health, if he chooses to stop doing TV, it makes you wonder, does he have something else in his mind that he wants to do? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see about that. All right, let me move to basketball one more time before the show wraps up today. I think because of the number of SEC teams in this term, there are 14 SEC teams. First of all, that in itself is an amazing accomplishment. I think it makes the storylines for the tournament incredibly interesting for us. I've been saying for a while my pick to win the tournament will be an SEC team. My pick is going to be Auburn to cut down the nets. I just believe they're the most likely team. However, some of the sports books, if you care about gambling, not everybody does, but if you do care about gambling point spreads, one of the things you can do at certain sports books, not every book offers this, but some of them do, they have like a prop bet like, do you want the SEC or the field in terms of the eventual national champion? In other words, do you think it's more likely that an SEC team, which is 14 teams out of 68, do you think it's more likely that an SEC team wins the national championship or a non-SEC team wins the national championship? And the SEC, for the books that has this, they are a slight favorite. Now, it's also kind of fluctuated, slightly larger, slightly less, but the SEC is a favorite compared to the field to win the national championship with the books that offer this. I would tell you that while Auburn is my pick to win the national championship, if you force me to make a SEC versus the field bet, I would take the field. I really would, because obviously there's no guarantee that my pick wins. And then beyond that, I don't know how much I love the other SEC teams to actually win the national championship. Obviously, Florida wins the SEC tournament. And on paper, Florida looks like one of the most dominant teams in America. However, as I mentioned a moment ago with Mark Few when we were talking about the Georgia game, I do believe the NCAA tournament is just one of those events where experience matters. Do you ever watch the old, going back to late 90s, early 2000s, I forget whatever year, when the poker movie Rounders came out and the Matt Damon character says, do you ever wonder why the same people end up at the final table at the World Series of Poker each and every year? Now, the World Series of Poker doesn't really quite work that way anymore, but it used to work that way where it was like the same people at the final table every year. I believe the NCAA tournament is sort of the same type of thing here where the coaches that are sort of always winning games are the coaches that typically win games in the tournament. And Todd Golden is a very inexperienced coach. Now, sometimes the inexperienced coaches step in, they show you how good they really are. That happened for Danny Hurley at UConn a couple of years ago when they first won the title in 2023. You know, Hurley at that time was an inexperienced coach, and we've since then learned he's probably one of the top coaches in the game, or as he would say it, the very best coach in the game. He's not shy about saying that. So maybe Golden is on his way to being that guy. We're not here to say that he's not. But in terms of you got to be skeptical about somebody. I'm going to be skeptical about the coach that hasn't done it yet, no matter how good Florida's been during the regular season. I've also said this. You look at the next two teams likely to advance. Alabama, they don't get enough defensive stops for me. That's not a team that I could ride with. Tennessee, they played a little better offensively down the stretch here. But once again, they really don't fill it up in the hoop good enough for me to say, yeah, that's a team that can win the national championship. I'd be skeptical of Tennessee. I'd be skeptical of Alabama. I'd be a little suspicious of Florida. So therefore, if it's not an Auburn winning the national championship, I'm looking at these Big 12 teams. Certainly Houston, Texas Tech, maybe Arizona a little bit, Iowa State probably, and obviously Duke. So that's where I think it gets really interesting. It's going to be a fun March Madness, I believe, because Georgia's a part of it. The SEC is so heavily involved in it. When you start playing out the bracket stuff, you see the possibility for some really intriguing matchups, too. It's just a really cool event. It's great to sort of have it back and kind of be a part of that, and we're just really, really excited about it. So we'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And by the way, if you're getting ready to enjoy your own basketball watching here this week, you got friends coming over, you got to feed them something. How about the delicious fresh Mex from Cercheros as a great choice for you on that? You got people coming over, a great catering option, 10 or more people. Hey, that's perfect for what Cercheros can do for you. Also, if you're just hungry right now and you want to go enjoy some, they got several convenient locations all across the state of Georgia. In fact, there's more and more coming online each and every day. They got 30 locations right now, but you're going to see more growth for Cercheros. There's perhaps even a location opening up near you if there isn't one already. It's friendly Tex-Mex. It's served fresh every day, 25 fresh toppings to choose from, And they take great care with, like, you want the veggies grilled, things like that, just to make your delicious, fresh Mex food taste even better. Cercheros will offer that for you. So I want you to find them online, whether it's an online order, it's a catering order, or if you just want to find a store location near you, Cercheros.com for more on that. That is Cercheros.com. Total confession, for a golden shoe today, I have to admit, I got a very surprising email. Because a year ago, we did a golden shoe bracket challenge here on DawgNation Daily. And I was going to send out some stuff to the people who participated. And as of yet, unfortunately, ashamedly, 1 year later, I still have not done that. So the one thing I would have assumed is that nobody wants to hear another word from me about a bracket challenge, since I did not take care of the people who were in our bracket challenge a year ago. However, very surprising email coming my way, courtesy of Jeremy. Let me show you this today. Jeremy Smith writing in to say, I was wondering if you're going to do a DawgNation Daily NCAA bracket again this year. Jeremy, I would love to do one, but I guess I'm a little, timid about this, just given the fact that we didn't make good on what we said we're going to do a year ago. So if people are like, Jeremy, they want us to do one, maybe we will. Maybe we'll try to do better about sending some stuff out. I do have some things to send out. It's just I'm not exactly a logistics expert. So Jeremy wants to do one. If y'all want to do one too, hit me up. Maybe we'll see about doing that. So thank you, Jeremy. We'll give you a golden shoe, and maybe we will have some good news on the bracket if other people want to do it. Now, the rest of the folks may say, I ain't being in any more of your bracket contests. I'm not going to do any of the more of that with you. And if that's your choice, I understand that there as well. But Jeremy wants to do one. If y'all want to do one, HMU, and maybe we will. Lousy, stinking Gators. They are, a number one seed in basketball. But they have no such chance for success in football. How about 1,591 days? That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That is our Gator Hater Updater. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised. The price is promised. You can trust them on that. All right. Let us see what's going on here. Brock Crafton also mentioned the West Virginia thing. Yeah, so super controversial with some of this kind of stuff. UNC kind of gets in over West Virginia. UNC, a pretty flimsy resume, but obviously one of the two or three biggest brands in all of college basketball. People talk about Bubba Cunningham, the UNC AD, being on the selection committee. Here's what I'm going to tell you. People, especially people on the outside, the periphery of college basketball fandom, sort of feel like it's scandalous that the UNC AD is on the selection committee that controversial in controversial fashion. Let me just say it that way. In controversial fashion, put North Carolina into the tournament. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I believe the real scandal is. The real scandal is not that Cunningham wants his team in the field. The real scandal is all of the ADs want North Carolina in the field. And this is the problem you always sort of run into, is that in like the darkest corner of the corridors of power, nobody's talking about who wins the games. They're talking about who plays in the games, because what they really care about is who watches the game. We care about who wins. They care about who watches. And more people will watch UNC. So even the non-UNC ADs also want UNC in the NCAA tournament, because more people watching means more money in pockets. And ultimately, that is what they care about. You'd love to believe that, like, in some dark corner somewhere, there's a smoke-filled boardroom where they're conspiring to let their team get the advantage and let their team get the win. Honestly, sometimes I wish that was the case. The actual truth is probably something different. Let's see what else. Wyatt Fielden says, good seeing you on Friday at the game. I'd be down for a bracket challenge. Wyatt, great to see you too. And, that'd be a so he also wants to do the bracket. So maybe the bracket challenge is coming back. I'm surprised at this. I never cease to be amazed. I thought, because I get grief, every now and then for having not done what I was supposed to do. So there's apparently more momentum for a bracket challenge than I realized. That is really surprising. That is really surprising. Let us see what else. Jack Fullerton says CBS gives Gonzaga 69% compared to the Dogs 31% on the win probability. Honestly, that sounds about right to me. And, I mean, I think even like the experts would say that Gonzaga is a little bit of a difficult team to handicap because they do dominate their level of competition. And sometimes from a statistical standpoint, that inflates them for games like this. You know, Georgia, if you start going like line for line comparing stats, I don't know that Georgia has any stats that are pretty in the way that Gonzaga's are. I just don't think there's anything that Georgia has, statistically speaking, that sort of looks good compared to like what a Gonzaga has. But, you know, there's oftentimes been all these years in which Gonzaga essentially has broken the Ken Palm rankings, things like that. Like they're not just number one, they're number one by a long shot. And in many of these years, Gonzaga's barely getting out of the Sweet 16. So, you know, something to keep in mind. People talk about pitch clocks for college baseball. They do have them. I mean, the length of time for the game is just related to the fact that, I mean, the other night, there were at least 6 hit by pitch, you know, batters hit by pitch, 8 gazillion walks, a lot of freebies. But, you know, in the midst of that, you got to keep competing, you got to keep fighting, and that's what Georgia did. Foster Moss wants the winner of the bracket challenge to get a Royal Caribbean Cruise vacation. Foster, I like the way you think on that. Alan Hampton, going back to the Bo Walker talk, says, I'm a running back guy. Shorter running backs have huge advantages in quickness, hiding behind the offensive line, et cetera. He says, Bo Walker at 5'8.5", 205 pounds. You kind of making that's an interesting point, comparing that to like the Ashton Genties and the Barry Sanderses. That's a pretty interesting point, Alan. I kind of like that. I'm not certainly going to here to tell you that that's what he turns out to be, but it's just sort of an interesting comparison. I think that's interesting. All right, let's see what else. Wig 2, going back to the idea of experienced quarterbacks, Arch Manning stepping in year 3 for Texas may be the perfect example of that. I think that's right as well. Brock Crafton says he thinks an offensive line matters more than the quarterback. And I mean, we say this all the time. When you look at the NFL, you've either got to have a Hall of Fame level quarterback or like a quarterback on kind of a rookie contract that gives you money to spend other places. And there's a college version of that that's sort of also true, which is if you don't have the 5-star kind of commanding $3 million out of high school, that does give you more money to spend other places. But it's also not that simple, because when you look at what's happening around the sport right now, you know, people have a tendency to sort of fantasize about a reality that doesn't actually exist. This came up on the show last week because of something that Mike said. You know, it's this, well, just go out to the transfer portal and just get your, you know, multi-million-dollar quarterback from the transfer portal. But look around, folks. Like, that guy really does not exist. The very best quarterbacks really are not transferring. And the quarterbacks available in the transfer portal are just not the kind of thing that I think gets you all that excited. I mean, I'm not trying to poke fun here, but like the big multi-million-dollar quarterback available in the transfer portal this year was Carson Beck. And I think the Georgia fans sort of feel like they've been there and done that when it comes to him. So the point is that there is no easy solution here, which is you can either spend less on a quarterback and have more money to spend other places, but you still need effective quarterback play. And if you're not right now getting the very best quarterbacks coming out of high school, you're kind of not getting the very best quarterbacks. Henry Dion shouting out Todd Robinson. You've heard really good things so far about the former Valdosta prospect. The guy was really Valdosta's starting quarterback, but at Georgia is going to be a defensive back, and a lot of people like a lot of what he brings to the table. Let's see what else. Let me go to Facebook for a moment. We'll see how people are doing over there. Do love bracket time of year. I really do enjoy it. Pete Williams also echoing the sentiments about the offensive line. Brian Whitaker also wants the bracket challenge. So there you go. So listen, the response to this has been better than I would have imagined. Better than I would have imagined. Because we had a great number of people that participated a year ago. At least I thought it was a good number of people. I think I have a pretty good idea for this, too. Let's see what else. Jacob O'Neal also shouting out Duke. Listen, Duke is always that team that generates a lot of opinions and a lot of interest, and people seem to like it. And I'm no different. When Duke loses in the first round or, an early upset from Duke, I do believe this is probably the best team that John Shire has coached. And I know we kind of think back to when, say, Zion was a freshman or something like that, the early exit from the tournament, like putting a lot of tournament hopes on a Cooper Flagg. Now, that's even pre-injury, you would have said this. Putting a lot of hopes on a tournament hopes on a Cooper Flagg, not always a great recipe in March Madness. March Madness is an experienced player's game. But Flagg is good, and Duke itself is pretty good, too. Justin Ham also wants the bracket challenge. All right, well, maybe we're into something. Maybe we're onto something on this. Tennille Calvino, we talked about the green thing before. So I don't really own any green clothes. And I have a couple Masters things. I guess that's the only green I have. I've always hated – now my brother's birthday is today, so I always wish him a happy birthday, and I'm happy for him. But when it comes to, the traditions around St. Patrick's, especially, the getting pinched, I can't stand that. I hated that when I was a kid. Hated it when I was a kid. So, yeah, I'm not wearing green. I guess I probably should be. I wonder if they make – I'm sure they do. They make everything these days. Green Georgia gear. I bet they probably do make that. Ken Holcomb says the solution at quarterback for the Dogs is to ride out what we have through development instead of dumping a lot of cash in the position. Kent, you could be right about that, but there are risks associated with that because, right now on paper, Georgia appears to have a lot less quarterback depth, both you're ready for this year and in the pipeline than some other programs do. You do have to kind of be honest about that. Yeah, see, Tennille Calvino, I think, Tennille Calvino says her daughter was, quote, freaking out about St. Patrick's Day, terrified of getting pinched. I'm just telling you, when I was a kid, I hated this. I hated it. Could not stand the getting pinched. And, even when you get older and, it's I am well out of, if I ever had a going out phase of life, I am well past my going out phase of life. But even, going out on St. Patrick's Day, just a lot of pressure, a lot of crowds, a lot of pressure. I'm just not into. I'm not into all that. I'm not into that. It's when you're a bigger guy, crowded bars are very, very hard to navigate. Now, if you're single, you probably like close quarters. You get a chance to sort of force conversation. That's probably kind of what you want. But golly, man, just standing there like that, here's a green beer for $27. That's a rough. To me, that's rough. That's rough. Randy Hall says that, hey, send me my free cruise from last year and I'll play the bracket this year. There you go. Chastain Coleman says, what about the winner getting a chance to talk with you on here about the Dogs? We did bring the winner on last year, right? Yeah, so we did. So we at least paid off on that. Now, I said, so actually, maybe I'm being too hard on myself. We did bring the winner on the air, which is what we promised we would do. But I also said I was going to do something else. See, the problem is, so this is not good. I'm going to get up and walk away for a second. I'm going to stand up. And Jay, if you're back there, throw the RS. Actually, don't do that because people will get out. I'm going to hold on one second, y'all. So I had these made, I've got hundreds of these, and I was going to send them out. I don't know if we can zoom in on this or not. Can we come up here? Is it possible to zoom in on this? So I had these made. This was going to be a nice surprise to everybody who participated in the bracket challenge. It's a DawgNation Daily golden shoe sticker. So I had these made. I think they look really nice, and I was going to send these out, but collecting all that is not super easy. I thought these looked really good. I got a couple of packs of these, very nice stickers. Just as a way of saying thank you. They're not worth anything. They're not anything, too valuable or anything. But just a kind of a way of saying, hey, we appreciate you being a part of the show. Thank you very much. So we were going to do this. And honestly, stuff like that's just kind of hard. So I'd like to say the thought that counts. If you participated, and we did a bracket and we did a Masters a year ago. So if you participated, I got your gift right here in my hand, but it's not easy to do. Not easy to do. But anyway, we may still try to send these out. And if we do, because I said this the other day, I've actually got a really cool thing I want to do for people that I think is just cool, and it's not going to cost any money. It's just going to be free. I just want to do it for our audience. But I want to get these sent out before I do that. Bill Camacho says speaking of getting pinched, the last time I got pinched was at the beach here in St. Augustine, where I got seriously pinched by a crab. Listen, you got to be careful about that. Dave Snow says, how about a DawgNation get-together for G-Day? I think that sounds like a good idea, especially, Dave, now that you're back in Athens. I think that's a really good idea. We had another thing I was going to try to do. Logistically, it's probably not quite coming together. It's one of those things. We have a lot of ideas. Some of them sail right on through and become, actual living, breathing things. Some of them sort of die in the planning stage. UGA Marine says they have some green military appreciation gear. That I saw Kirby wear one of those things the other day. That'd be pretty nice. I wouldn't want to be like Stolen Valor necessarily, but I think that'd be kind of nice. All right, so I'm being told there is a hat on the internet, but it is sold out. I used to also like, when you were a kid, remember like the teams wear like the spring training green? I don't think the Braves ever did that. My memory is the Phillies always wore spring training green on St. Patrick's Day. I wonder how many teams wear green on St. Patrick's Day in spring training. I do remember some of that.
All of them got hats, official hats.
Okay, yeah. So now they all like pretty much now you can buy any color of anything. Like now some of these apparel makers are selling these blue Georgia shirts. Drives me insane. And listen, I love a lot of these apparel makers. I'm not here to trash any of them, but it's like you have these leftover blue shirts, so you just sort of slap a Georgia G on it and try to sell them. That's not Georgia's color. I can't stand that.
$47.99 for the official Braves St. Patrick's Day hat.
All right, so if you want the green Braves hat, $47.99, which is, not inexpensive for a hat, if I'm being honest. That is does not strike me as a bargain necessarily. Tennille Calvino says, I bet Notre Dame's got a bunch of green. Yeah, I mean, it's like I'm no fan of Notre Dame, but I do have to admit I do kind of like their gear a little bit. I think their stuff's a little bit sharp. I do have to admit that. All right, let's do a couple more. Yeah, Philip Jordan Wells mentioned like Savannah doing the food coloring in the river. I don't know why, because I'm a typically very festive person. I'm very into spectacles, big festival, big events. I typically like that sort of thing. But the traditional stuff around St. Patrick's Day just sort of stresses me out. The thought of being with 8 gazillion people, and I like Savannah. I love Savannah. The thought of being in Savannah on St. Patrick's Day seems like a nightmare. And some of you will probably go, it's probably the best thing you ever did. And if it is, I'm sure I'm missing out. But that seems like a lot of work. It really does. It really does. I'm also being asked about the corned beef, the cabbage. See, I don't do any of that kind of stuff. Like, people for New Year's eat like the collard greens and the black-eyed peas. I don't really typically do that. I'm a pretty picky eater overall. I do like collard greens, though. So corned beef and cabbage. I guess I don't really like, like British, Irish style food very much, I don't think. Of all the European cuisines, the sort of British/Irish, probably my least favorite. Oh, Alan Rabanchik says he may show up to his first DawgNation tailgate this year. Well, I'll tell you this. I had my first DawgNation Invasion conversation of 2025 with somebody this past week. We start planning very early around here. And so I had my first DawgNation Invasion conversation. It was early days, but we did have one. Brian Whitaker says, when I lived in Valdosta, the bars used to go all out on St. Patty's Day. Yeah, I mean, it's a big bar day. I don't know why this is. I really don't have an explanation for this. I think I am more pro Cinco de Mayo than St. Patrick's Day. And I think the reason why is oftentimes Cinco de Mayo is the same day as like the Kentucky Derby and stuff like that. So I think I have better Cinco de Mayo memories than I have St. Patrick's memories. Now, a lot of days, depending on how the calendar falls, St. Patrick's Day could be like the first day of the NCAA tournament. So you can have good sports on St. Patty's Day too. And I guess it could be the players as well, depending on, by the way, shout out to Roy McIlroy, who I believe won the aggregate playoff this morning. The point is, I think I like Cinco de Mayo better than St. Patrick's Day. Just realized that, but I believe that's probably true. There's also, I think, a lot more like Mexican restaurants, and so therefore I think you're sort of spreading the crowds out a little bit better. Whereas if if you're into St. Patty's Day, if that's your sort of branding, boy, you're really into it, and I feel like I feel like we have a little bit more spread out options when it comes to Cinco de Mayo, perhaps. All right, let's do a couple final comments. We'll get ready to go. Foster Moss says he does not like Savannah. I mean, I feel like that Savannah is one of those things that it can be good for different ages. Like, a lot of bars, good for people in their 20s. I would say that there's a good restaurant scene there. That's good for, good for me, good for my age. You got Tybee across the river. I feel like there's enough going on that everybody's got their thing. Jonathan Aaron says, if you're going to spend high dollar on a player, do you want quarterback, wide receiver, or running back? I mean, it would not be running back for me, with all due respect to great running backs. It's either quarterback or wide receiver. And, I don't know. I mean, quarterback's got to probably be the answer. But, I mean, do we think a quarterback's going to be the highest paid player in college football this year? Maybe not, right? I mean, there's a really good chance Jeremiah Smith's the highest paid player in the sport, right? I mean, maybe paid more money than Arch Manning is, maybe. Oh, I mean, I'd like to have Jeremiah Smith. Ryan Williams probably going to be paid a lot of money too. Now 18, by the way. So in the NFL, I don't think you would pay a receiver more than quarterback. In college, might you do that? You might. That's a good question, actually. Adam J. asking about bootleg DawgNation stuff. People do this all the time, and every now and then, we'll go through there, and there have been moments in which we've had to, get some stuff taken down. Every now and then that does happen. Gary Roach says he doesn't think that Kirby's going to put all of his eggs in the Jared Curtis basket. Well, the one thing we know that Georgia is recruiting other quarterbacks. We do know that, but a little bit different than, like, say, the Julian Lewis thing from a year ago, where, Georgia wasn't going to make its move until, right now, until Curtis makes his move. Georgia was, I think, totally content to take a quarterback other than Lewis last year. I think this year they're kind of, if Curtis wants to come, he's their guy, and if not, they'll just pivot to something else. All right, what else? All right, final comments. Let me go to DawgNation.com here for a minute. Oh, Garrison Tucker still says he has his Dog Nation t-shirt from the 2016 UNC game. Garrison, that's awesome. So that would have been like very early days of Dog Nation. Those would have been the very first Dog Nation t-shirts. That's really cool. I'm glad that you still have that. You know, tailgate before the North Carolina game in 2016, I believe that was the second ever Dog Nation event. I believe the first ever Dog Nation public event had taken place a few days prior to that. Boy, that was fun back then, man. I mean, it's still fun now, but cool to think about, you know, kind of how it started. Savannah Bryan talking about drinking anywhere in Savannah as long as you got the plastic cup. He said that's every day there, not just St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, I mean, there's a great bustling scene. I mean, I think Savannah's a really fun place. He also says it's an official holiday in Savannah. School is closed. Most businesses are also closed too. All right, let's see what else. Garrison Tucker says, who does Gunnar Stockton target the most in 2025? My early bet on that would be Noah Thomas, but that's also pretty early. Randy Hall mentioning the hope to do a public event. Like I said, I had one that we were going to try to do. It's not quite coming together the way that I hoped, so we're going to keep working on that, see what we can make happen. We're going to keep working on that. Garrison Tucker says he remembered talking to me way back then. Yeah, Garrison, you and I both a good bit younger back then, I'm afraid. That's awesome. But great memories for sure. Okay, anything else? All right, we're going to go for now. Hey, great stuff. Thanks for making it fun. Maybe we will get our bracket thing together. I think that'll be cool. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow. Y'all have a great day. Check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust RS Andrews on all of that, including, listen, warm weather's on its way. Get the AC tuned up. Get yourself feeling cool and comfortable all spring and summer long. RS Andrews can show you how. Somebody may have told you need to get a new air conditioning unit. That's expensive. Listen, one of these days you probably will. But our friends at RS Andrews may be able to tell you how to get some new life out of that old unit, and it may only cost you $99 to do so. So find them online at rsandrews.com. And we'll see you back here tomorrow for the program, 10 a.m., DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then, everybody.